Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. We have lots to cover today, and we are going to spend some time looking at a couple of religious liberty cases, as we always do. 100 days, and how are we doing in terms of Donald Trump's administration? Going to talk a little bit about campus riots and snowflakes, and maybe even get into ESPN and a few other issues on the table. All of it relates to what has been happening this week, and we'll be looking at what has taken place and what might be happening in the future. Penna Dexter with me, co-host, of course, of Point of View, and in studio with us as well, Michael Berry, Senior Counsel and also Director of the Military Affairs Division of First Liberty. Penna, as always, lots to cover today.
There's so much, and I guess for me, what I've been thinking about the last couple days is President Trump's first 100 days, because tomorrow is actually 100 days.
That's right.
And I know it's an artificial deadline, and a lot of presidents don't get a lot of legislation on the books, getting things through Congress. But what they can do, and what President Trump has done, is reverse bad executive orders and laws that were passed at the end through the Congressional Review Act, and also just reversing executive orders and signing executive orders. And I think if you look at that body of work that President Trump has done, no, he didn't get Obamacare repeal yet, but he has that body of work. I think it shows a clear sort of trend that he's trying to make America more prosperous, less regulatory, and he is filling social issues promises to the people that elected him.
And again, it was one of the things that was first put forward by the Speaker of the House was a 200-day limit rather than a 100-day, and that was back in January, so it's not like they moved the goalpost. They recognized that you've only had a few presidents really accomplish things legislatively in the first 100 days. Of course, Lyndon Johnson having been in the United States Senate, and the Senate Majority Leader was one. You've only had one other president who's been able to confirm a Supreme Court justice in the first 100 days, and that goes all the way back to Harry Truman, so there's a few successes there. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. And if you want to take some notes, especially as we're coming to that first 100 days, and a lot of people will be talking about it, you can post some of that on your Facebook page. But I thought we'd come to Michael Berry first. And the article that we've posted here relates to something that will take you immediately to First Liberty. You can go to firstliberty.org or simply look at this. 127 more doors for the Constitution and religious liberty. Michael, I know we can probably say this now because Kelly has said it on the air. One of the things that behind the scenes First Liberty has been doing is evaluating some of those individuals that President Donald Trump will put into the federal judiciary, either in the circuit court or the federal court. And those are lifetime appointments, and that's very significant, isn't it?
Absolutely. As we talk about President Trump's first 100 days, probably the most significant accomplishment in that 100 days has been the confirmation of Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Of course, replacing the late Justice Scalia. And, as we look at the confirmation of Justice Scalia, for those who, as First Liberty does, care about religious liberty in this country, we saw Justice Gorsuch's confirmation is really a great boon for religious freedom. In fact, he's already heard his first case dealing with religious freedom, and is likely to hear many more, throughout his tenure on the court. But we can't stop with simply one justice confirmed on the Supreme Court and say, okay, basically, pat ourselves on the back and say, we've accomplished the mission. As we've pointed out, and as Kelly has pointed out, there are approximately 127 federal vacancies in the judiciary, and that could be from anything from federal district court judges up to Court of Appeals judges. And one of the things that we've taken upon ourselves to do at First Liberty is to begin the long and arduous process of reviewing decisions that somebody may have issued if they were, a state court judge, or things that they've participated in as attorneys working for the government and things like that. So we can start to get a sense for how they might view religious freedom and our First Amendment rights in this country as well. So it's certainly a great opportunity, but a lot of work to be done.
Yes. Well, again, only 1% of the cases go to the Supreme Court, so most of those are decided at that lower level. And Penna, that article that we have a link to has a map that people can look at and really gives you some great history. So I would certainly commend that to individuals that would like to know a little bit more about almost sort of the behind the scenes, but the most significant and very significant appointments that will be taking place under the Trump administration.
I'm always so happy when I hear Kelly is going to be away because he's actually looking at judges. I don't know what he's doing today, but I know last week we did talk about that and the fact that First Liberty's been given the opportunity to do some of the vetting work, and it's very important, as we know, as we've watched these confirmations throughout the years. But Mike, it's what's interesting to me and really to think about, it's not only the Supreme Court, it's not only the courts of the federal courts of appeal, it's also the district courts. I mean, all these courts are, they've had 8 years really of Obama, and that's a lot. So now we need to get some new judges on the courts, correct?
That's right. During the Obama administration, President Obama had the opportunity and seized upon the opportunity to really reshape much of our federal judiciary. There were some circuits, which are, the geographic regions that cover our country, where when cases are decided by a federal district court judge, they go up to appeal, and that's where they're decided, is in these circuits. And the circuits for many decades kind of had a reputation for whether they leaned more left or leaned more right, or maybe they were kind of down the middle. And throughout the 8 years of the Obama administration, we saw that many of the circuits that may have just leaned slightly to the right or may have been more in the middle now lean very heavily to the left. And so he had the opportunity to greatly reshape our federal judiciary. But with these 127 vacancies, I think President Trump has an equal opportunity to kind of move the needle back at least to the middle.
So, Mike, I want to get to some of your cases after this, but just to stay on the courts for a few more minutes because it's so important. This was one of the campaign pledges that President Trump made was about Gorsuch, but he also signaled judges as a whole. Do you think that just because you guys have insider knowledge, is this administration prepared to appoint as many justices and judges that are needed as far as just knowing the candidates? Well,
I would be surprised if any president weren't willing to seize the opportunities that were placed in front of them. If there are 127 vacancies, I can see no reason why a president, and President Trump would be no exception, why he wouldn't want to really cement his legacy as a champion of the Constitution, as a champion of religious freedom in this country, and many of the other issues that many Americans care about, life, liberty, economic prosperity, etc. And so this is a fantastic opportunity for President Trump. If were I in his shoes, I absolutely would seize upon that opportunity.
But we don't really know yet what's happening. I mean, there's not anything that's on the front page about who's appointed.
That's right. You don't know who's going to be appointed until it's publicly announced, and then of course they have to go through the confirmation process because these are lifelong appointments to the federal bench. So there needs to be a lot of vetting done and a lot of people doing their homework and really digging in and learning more about what these judges, what their judicial philosophy is, what their legal philosophy is, etc.
Well, probably aren't going to have as many filibusters as we've had in the past for a lot of reasons. We want to come back and talk about one specific case, a very good piece that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, a court-martial for a Bible verse, and some support for that particular case from some unexpected sources. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The new book by David Green has the arresting title, Giving It All Away. He is the founder of Hobby Lobby and tells the story of his success and calls for Christians to give generously to churches and other ministries. He was on my radio program last week, and we talked about Hobby Lobby, the Museum of the Bible, and the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Green family has been at the center of all this and much more. Most people know that Hobby Lobby is closed on Sunday. They may not also realize that their stores close earlier than other stores. That means they're only open 66 hours a week and compete with stores open many more hours. David Green did this so that his employees can spend more time with their families. Hobby Lobby also pays its full-time employees well. Back in 2009, they raised their base pay to $10 an hour. The next year, they tacked on $1. The next year, they did it again and then again. This is another way that the Green family values their employees. I asked David Green if he ever imagined that he would have to sue the federal government. The thought never crossed his mind, but they did so when the HHS mandate would have required them to provide abortifacients for their employees. The fines alone would have cost him $1.3 million per day. Much of his book focuses on giving and challenges Christians to engage in the adventure of tithing. He has 3 principles they use and encourages all of us to implement them as well. First, set your criteria. What are you going to fund? What are your priorities? Second, set your giving amount. Give the first fruits, not what is left over. And finally, set fire for the future. He also has thought quite a bit about how to make generosity generational. His book is certain to spark your interest and encourage you in giving. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351. One particular case that we've talked about before, as a matter of fact, I'm mentioning it tonight in a graduation speech because it just is one where people just kind of can't even believe it. It has to do with, again, an individual we've talked about on this program, Monica Sterling, who simply had a message from the book of Isaiah, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." And this particular piece, Penna, as we can see, was actually written by an individual that went through something similar. He is a rabbi now, but as an individual who was Jewish and served in the military, they allowed him to actually cover his head with a yarmulke. But then there was a lawsuit, and he lost 5-4 in a case known as Goldman versus Weinberger, but points out that afterwards the Congress enacted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and he is very supportive of what might be a case that makes its way to the Supreme Court.
Well, this could be a very important case, and we have with us Mike Berry, who handles the religious freedom cases in the military for First Liberty. So he's the perfect person to have. I thought this was so fascinating that this this Jewish man who lost his case back in, I forget, the 70s, I think. He lost it. But with the composition of the court right now, Mike, it's possible that that loss and his testimony might help you, correct?
That's absolutely right. Right now the Sterling case, it's Sterling versus United States, sits at the Supreme Court at what we call the cert stage, which is where the Supreme Court will decide whether or not they're actually going to hear the case or not. We expect to hear a decision from the Supreme Court as to whether they're going to take this case probably within the next month or so. We're getting down to the wire on this, and obviously we're very hopeful that the Supreme Court will take the Sterling case and decide this important issue of whether or not somebody can be charged with a crime for not removing a Bible verse when somebody in the military orders them to do so and actually orders them to throw it in the trash, and whether or not the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, as Kerby spoke of, whether that would offer some sort of protection for people in the military. And this op-ed by Dr. Goldman was a fantastic testimony, if you will, of what he had to go through when he was serving in the military and was ordered to remove his head covering.
I'm looking at the dates here. It looks like his case was in 1986, and he lost. What's the difference now as far as the court and the facts of the case that it gives you such hope?
Well, back when Dr. Goldman's case went through and went through the system and became Goldman versus Weinberger at the Supreme Court, there was no Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So there was no statutory protection that Congress had enacted that would protect service members and their religious freedom. So the court really didn't have anything to go off of in terms of a federal law, and they said, well, in the military, when people give you orders, we have to be deferential to that. And in the absence of any specific or explicit direction by Congress saying we want to make sure that we protect certain things, there are certain exceptions to when you're given orders to do things that violate your religious beliefs. What are we left to do? And so it was obviously it was a 5-4 decision. So it was literally one vote made the difference. And now here we are again with 9 justices back on the court, and we just talked about earlier. We've got Justice Gorsuch, who all indicators are that he is very friendly to religious freedom, and we're hopeful that now that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is in place, it's been in place for nearly 30 years now. That that the court will look to that and say, okay, after the Goldman decision, Congress actually passed a law. It took, we always say that, it takes an act of Congress to enact change in this country. Well, it actually did take an act of Congress, and it was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So I think that's what the court has an opportunity to do, is say, okay, things have changed. We now have this law that protects people. Let's use that law and apply it.
I was just wondering, too, since, of course, you head up the Military Affairs Division of First Liberty, does this not have some implication to some of the other military cases that you've had to deal with over the years?
Absolutely. And the Sterling case will either be good or bad for religious liberty in the military. I mean, let's make no mistake about that this is an opportunity to either promote or detract from religious freedom in the military. And in fact, a very vocal opponent of religious freedom, a man by the name of Mikey Weinstein, has already publicly declared that if the Sterling case goes against Monifa Sterling, that he is going to shout from the rooftops, basically, see, the military can order you to do things, even things that violate your faith, and they can get away with it because it's the military. That if you're putting on the uniform of the United States, these people who are sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, it doesn't matter. You are beholden to the military, and whatever they tell you to do, you have to do it.
Wow. So again, we encourage you to find out a little bit more. And of course, Michael Berry heads up the Military Affairs Division of First Liberty. And if you are aware of some of these cases in which you or someone you know in the military has not been able to exercise his or her religious liberty, I know that they would be appreciative if you would contact them.
There's one other piece to this that we didn't mention, and that is that back when Dr. Goldman's case was being decided, there was one justice, sort of an unlikely one and sort of not, who just back then, she excoriated the military, the Wall Street Journal says, for callous indifference to my faith, and implored the armed forces to accommodate the public service to the spiritual needs. In other words, he should be able to wear the yarmulke. This was the opinion back then of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes. She
still sits on the court, and she's usually the one we think is going to go against religious liberty. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a very promising sign that someone like, and I mean, just to make sure everybody's clear on the facts, this was back when Justice Ginsburg was still Judge Ginsburg and was sitting on the D.C. Court of Appeals, one of these appellate courts that we talked about before the break are so important because so few cases make it to the Supreme Court. Well, when she was on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, Dr. Goldman lost originally in front of the 3-judge panel and then petitioned the entire court, what we call en banc, to basically rehear the case because he wanted to have the opportunity for all the judges to hear it. Well, the majority of the judges decided not to rehear the case in front of the D.C. Circuit, but there were a handful that said, no, we really do need to rehear this because this is such an important issue. And those judges were, at the time, it was Judge Kenneth Starr, whose name is probably very familiar to those who follow, the law and legal issues and politics and whatnot. There was another judge who then went on to become a Supreme Court justice by the name of Antonin Scalia, who also said, we really need to hear this case. And then the last one, as Penna just mentioned, was then Judge, now Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So it goes to show that even somebody as conservative as the late Justice Scalia was, and somebody who is supposedly as liberal as Justice Ginsburg are, they can still find common ground on issues like religious freedom in the military.
Oh, very good. So again, that was some editorial that appeared earlier in the week, and Simcoe Goldman wrote that, and you might want to find that. And of course, we also have some of the links to First Liberty. Just before we take a break, let's talk about first 100 days. And if you're taking some notes, I just before the broadcast said around the table here that the number 66 shows up a couple of times. First of all, President Trump actually has written 66 executive orders. That was as of April 19th. He may have done a few since then. And so that's one place where you find the number 66. Interestingly enough, the issue of immigration crossings has dropped by about 66%, which was very interesting. And if you want to take one economic issue, the stock market went from 19,000 to 21,000 in 66 days, which is the fastest 2,000 point increase ever. And so whether you look at economic issues, whether you look at some of the social issues, whether you look at some of the executive order issues, so far, so good, but a lot of the promises are still waiting to be kept. And I guess it gets down to when people are giving grades, there's still probably a number of incompletes on the scorecard so far for Donald Trump, don't you think?
There's a lot of incompletes. And, as I've watched this presidency unfold, I've actually been amazed at the speed with which things are done and the attempts to fulfill campaign promises. And as you said, there hasn't really been congressional successes yet, but it's 100 days. I mean, that's not much. So I am just, I'm actually positive on this and pretty high on it. When I think of the cabinet that's been appointed, yeah, we're a little slow on some of the cabinet appointments or on some of the presidential White House appointments, but the cabinet is fairly impressive. And so, I think that's a plus in the first 100 days. Justice Gorsuch is a plus. The green lighting of the Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines and a lot of the regulatory executive orders or the reversals of Obama orders are going to be good for the economy. I know there's a lot, just a few minutes before the break, but I think another one is what happened this week, that there's been actually a fairly simple outline of a very comprehensive tax plan that is meant to kickstart the economy and actually has something for every level of taxpayer. There's something in it for them. So, I think that's, takes a while to put that together, and that's a plus. So there's more, but we'll talk about it after the break.
Certainly, you've got quite a list there, and we'll kind of work our way through some of those. And if you have some comments or questions, let's open up the phones too, 1-800-351-1212. We'll go through a little bit more of the first 100 days, and we'll get into some of the things happening on college campuses right now. Penna Dexter's commentary on snowflakes. I've got one coming out next week, and we'll get into all of that right after these important messages.
Point of View turned life right side up for Emily's children. Emily listens in Illinois. She and her husband blissfully sent their children off each day to what she called our small, quaint public school until Point of View led them to watch the documentary Indoctrination. She said, "We came to realize the need for us to educate our children at home. We want their education to be built on the solid foundation of Scripture." Emily said that would not have happened were it not for Point of View's bold consistency of shining light on public education. Your support for Point of View changes the future for children like Emily's. It leads people to start schools and ministries and businesses that change lives. How has the Truth Team impacted you? Please invest to bring truth to other families like Emily's. Support Truth today. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View.
The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station.
And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Mike Berry in studio for just a minute, and I'll take some phone calls talking about the first 100 days. Now, again, I think it's fair to say that the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, was talking about the first 200 days, and there's nothing magical about 100 days other than the fact that right now you're hearing everybody writing about this, and this piece that is from the Daily Signal talks about a number of accomplishments. And Penna, you had a pretty good list there of things that have happened in the first 100 days. Again, only individual I know in modern times other than Harry Truman that has been able to get a Supreme Court confirmation in the first 100 days. So that's pretty significant. And of course, as we've talked with Michael Berry, filling those 127 vacancies in the federal judiciary are going to be significant as well. But what are some others? You mentioned, of course, the pipeline and a few others. Any others that we might put on the table?
Yeah, you said a lot of people were writing about this, and that's true. One person that wrote about it was Ken Blackwell from Family Research Council, and his piece pointed out a lot of it.
Okay.
And it was a lot to get him confirmed. But he is doing so much in so many areas, and ensuring the integrity of America's electoral system, for instance, ending lawsuits like who can use which bathrooms. So and that executive order went away, or that guidance went away. I mean, to us, social conservatives, that is huge. But also on the foreign policy front. I think that his appointments to the foreign policy team were very good. When you think of Nikki Haley at the UN, and Rex Tillerson's turned out to be, he's learning on the job, but pretty good. But the action that he took against Syria, not that we're saying we're for or against us intervening there, but that particular one, and it was so decisive, I think said something about the administration and how it's not going to be another Obama administration. Taking a hard line against Russia, too, because people thought he was so pro-Russia, and having some positive meetings with world leaders. Also, there's another order, freezing the hiring of many federal workers. I think that, again, it's a big positive for the administration to show that we're not going to grow government. We're actually going to try to get more efficient here. And then, of course, as I said, rescinding regulations. And one of the policies that he's put in place is rescinding 2 regulations for every one that is added. And, you said the market's up about 14% since Election Day, and now we have the tax reform proposal. Now, there's a lot of negatives and things that could have been done better, but we're talking about the accomplishments today.
Yeah, we'll get into some of those issues of Obamacare and the tax reform in just a minute. But let's take a phone call. We'll go to Georgia first on the Good News Network. Jan, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, thank you. I just really appreciate, is it Penna Dexter that you have your guest?
Yes, Penna Dexter is the co-host, yes.
Yes, well, I just really appreciate her giving the positives that this president has accomplished in, a little over 3 months, and I just sense, especially on Christian radio, there's so much negative comments about President President Trump. They're sort of discouraging that the Christian radio people would, seems to me, that I may be wrong, but I do appreciate what was just said about the positives, but it seems I've gotten an opinion that there's a lot of negative stuff toward Trump, and good grief, this president has accomplished more than I can't think of any other president in the last 30, 40 years. And I started paying attention to politics when I was a 9-year-old child, and I'm just very proud of him, and I think he needs our prayers continually. Not that y'all are urging that, but I just felt like I needed to say this.
I am urging it. I think we need to be praying for our leaders. That's a biblical, whether you agree with them or not.
National Day of Prayer is next Thursday. We're going to be doing some things on Monday to get you ready for that, and we'll be talking about it again on Thursday. And, of course, we've had this Pray for America. And, Jan, you were talking about Christian radio. Let me say something that you won't hear except on Christian radio. when some people have looked at this, and I'll give credit to Ed Stetzer, he has been involved with the Southern Baptist Convention for many years and now is at Wheaton. He made the statement when he looks at both the cabinet officers and then the sub-cabinet officers that there are just an enormous number of evangelical Christians. And he makes the case that there are probably more evangelical Christians so far in this cabinet than in any president. And Mike, you've been watching one in the military. Can you maybe encourage our people to pray for him? Because I got a feeling because he takes Christian stands, he sort of has a bullseye in his back, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. The current Secretary of the Army nominee is a gentleman by the name of Mark Green. And he has ended up with a target on his back, just like you said, Kerby, simply because he is an evangelical Christian who holds, what many would consider to be socially conservative views on issues of life and religious liberty, and also has a fantastic military background. He served as a flight surgeon with some special forces, and back when he was on active duty, and so he's got the military background necessary to serve. He also has, governance and leadership background necessary to be a Secretary of the Army, but that hasn't stopped the left and the progressives in this country from going on the attack and on the offensive after him. Why? Simply because he is a conservative evangelical Christian who is not ashamed of those beliefs and those values, and he holds them openly. And so that's going to be a real fight to get him confirmed as the Secretary of the Army, and he needs our prayers too.
Yes. So there's a good example, Jen, of something you won't hear in the secular media, because we've seen a lot of Christians that have made their way into various positions. Another one that we just mentioned a minute ago off air, you want to mention that one as well, a spokesperson as well?
Sure. I just come across the wire that as being a staunch pro-life advocate for decades, longer than I can even remember, in this country, was named as the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs for the Department of Health and Human Services.
And Penna, we've interviewed her
She's
many
a friend.
times. Yeah, a very good friend.
She's been on Point of View a lot, and I see her at various conferences in D.C., and I do consider her a friend. She's got just deep pro-life and pro-family just knowledge and sensibility. She's a Ph.D. and a mother of 5.
And something that shouldn't be lost is the position and the agency that she's being sent to. There's obviously some strategic thinking going on, and having somebody who's been a pro-life advocate for decades going to where? Health and Human Services. The agency that will probably have the most direct impact on that, that sphere of influence.
Yeah, like healthcare regulations that are issued.
Sure, and think about the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tom Price, has been on this program with us as well. So, it is amazing. Jan, I think you raised a good question. Sometimes on Christian radio, we obviously have to call it the way we see it, but at the same time, after we look at these first 100 days, it is amazing to me. If you had told me last year, first of all, Donald Trump would be the president, I'm not sure I would believe it, although I thought it was a possibility. And then if you told me that he would have more Christians in his cabinet than any other president, and that's more than George W. Bush, more than Ronald Reagan, I would never have believed it, and yet that seems to be exactly what has taken place. Yeah,
Jan mentioned Christian leaders and radio personalities negative on Trump, whether they are or not. I do think that we need to take a view of the country where what is being accomplished, who can accomplish that. Sometimes you have the best, most godly people in office, but they don't have the talent to move things forward. And with Trump, I was a never Trumper for a long time, but I am looking at this man, and his abilities in business are translating over, because he starts with a negotiating position, but it is a position. So he sometimes doesn't get everything he wants, but he's definitely, I think at the end of even 4 years, we're going to see that he's moved the country in a positive direction. And, that's all we can ask for in politics. We can't ask for perfection, but we can ask to go in the right direction.
One other Christian we got to mention is the Vice President, Mike Pence. And as we go to a break here, this is a time when we play Penna Dexter's commentary, and it's entitled Liberal Snowflakes. But she's talking about the fact that Mike Pence is actually scheduled to speak at Notre Dame. That makes a lot of sense. First of all, he used to be the governor of Indiana. That's where Notre Dame is. But as you might imagine, there is controversy about that and many others. And so we're going to come back and not only hear the commentary, but talk a little bit about this and get into what has taken place, because we're not just talking about a few situations. Ann Coulter was in the news this week. We're talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. We're talking about Charles Murray. We're talking about Heather McDonald. We're talking about David Horowitz. And I can make another list of just what has happened in the last few weeks. And this has certainly become a concern. So if you want to know a little bit more, we have some of these articles posted on the website. And also right now on our Viewpoint section, you have the Liberal Snowflakes commentary by Penna. And if you haven't signed up to receive it, of course, you receive mine Monday through Friday. You receive hers on Saturday, but of course, you can download it right now. And I might encourage you to do just that. Read it or listen to it right now online. And then hit that share button. Put it on your Facebook page. Put it on your Twitter feed if you have such a thing. Or maybe just send it as an email to someone that would need to know more about it. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about some of the campus riots, the snowflakes, and the future for free speech right after this.
Vice President Mike Pence is scheduled to be the commencement speaker at the University of Notre Dame this year. But two snowflake types in Notre Dame's senior class say that because he represents the Trump administration, the vice president's presence on campus will make them feel unsafe. Notre Dame often invites newly elected presidents to address the graduates, but, well, there was this petition against inviting President Trump. Besides, Mike Pence is the perfect choice. He's articulate, gracious, and the recent governor of Indiana, the state where Notre Dame sits. Hundreds of alumni and staff have signed a letter being circulated on social media expressing empathy for students who feel marginalized by White House statements and policies. Poor babies. Certainly there will be other graduating college seniors traumatized by the commencement speaker their school has chosen. We're already seeing rioting, violence, property damage, physical assault, and canceled speeches. Students whine that if they're female, non-white, or openly non-heterosexual, they are in physical or psychological danger from hearing a conservative speak. This students as victims mantra is really another very disturbing manifestation of the leftist ideology that has, for decades, prevailed among faculty and administrations of the nation's colleges and universities. The Wall Street Journal recently published an opinion piece by conservative thinker Heather McDonald, whose speech at Claremont McKenna was cut short by protesters. She points out that at the center of all this campus intolerance is a worldview that sees Western culture as both racist and sexist. The overriding goal of the educational establishment, she writes, is to teach young people within the ever-growing list of victim classifications to view themselves as essentially oppressed. Universities had better start clamping down and enforcing the law. Otherwise, after graduation, snowflakes will be in for a rude awakening in a world where no one's going to protect them from opinions they don't agree with. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the articles that we have posted here is entitled Mob Wins in Berkeley. And, of course, that is something we've been talking about for a while. Also one, so what if the protesters are paid, which I thought was kind of interesting. So we'll get into some of those in just a minute. But let's start off with, of course, Penna Dexter's liberal snowflakes, because this particular point is very relevant. I am speaking tonight at a university graduation, and they still let Christians in at Christian university graduations, but not many other places. And Mike Pence is just the first of many that will probably be seen as so controversial that maybe a few of them, like in the past, will be disinvited. But at the moment, the plan is for Vice President Mike Pence to speak at Notre Dame. Why is that controversial?
Really? Well, it is. And, I haven't heard the announcements of many of the colleges yet, who their speakers are. It's really early. You're speaking at a graduation tonight. It's still April.
It seems like you should not have a graduation in April.
Yeah, that's very early.
But maybe they're getting the kids out early so they can go get the jobs before the rest of them graduate. I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of fun. But
he is scheduled to be the commencement speaker at Notre Dame. And I do know that Notre Dame normally has the recently elected president. Obama spoke there, for instance. And when Trump's name was floated, it was just the kibosh was put on it immediately. And so Mike Pence was asked. And I think he's great because he was the governor of Indiana. That's where Notre Dame is. And he's just so good. And he's a great speaker. I don't know if a lot of people know that he used to be a radio host. So he's good at speaking and communicating issues and truth. So it'll be good. I'm happy that he's there. There are a few people, though, that are very scared that he's coming because they're so afraid that they're going to be either physically or psychologically harmed by hearing a point of view that's, to the right of theirs. And that's really, what you hear in these protests, that the students are just afraid, and that's why we call them snowflakes. And, that is part of this. But I think the other part of it is that the university officials are not insisting on free speech. They're not, at Berkeley, for instance, they should have gotten the law enforcement out and insisted that Ann Coulter be able to speak, because otherwise all you do is embolden the violence and you embolden the mobs that are going to universities across the country, and also the liberal students at the universities that are protesting. If you don't take action, it's just like a child. If you don't punish or spank them or insist on good behavior, you're just going to continue to get worse behavior, and it's going to get, when they become teenagers, you could have some real heartache on your hands. Well, these students, the point I make at the end of my commentary is that when they get out in the working world, they are not going to have faculty protecting their liberal sensibilities. And they're going to also not have anyone protecting them from being criticized for their behavior. So, that's bad for them. The university is falling down on preparing them. But, so, yes, part of it is their snowflakiness, kind of spoiled and coddled. But the other part is these administrators, most of them are from the left. And the leftist ideology that's being perpetrated here, and the lack of conservative views, the fact that every time a conservative goes to a school, they're protested or railroaded out, is bad, because it's all it is advancing the leftist agenda. And there's no chance on these campuses for a balanced education where you can get both sides. There are very few conservative professors, and those that survive usually have to stay fairly quiet. So, that's what this is about. It's about liberalism, leftism, radical ideas, really winning the day and holding sway at the university.
Michael, let me come to you for just a minute, because one of the things that was said by presidential candidate, former governor of Vermont, Howard Dean, is that hate speech is not protected by the Constitution. And if you say that anything Mike Pence says about the traditional family is hate speech, we're in really shaky constitutional grounds, aren't we, in that case?
Yeah, Governor Dean's comment was laughable from a legal standpoint. Somebody actually asked him to point to, do you have any cases or authority you can cite to that proposition that hate speech isn't protected by the First Amendment? And he tried to list off a couple of case names. And if you go and read those cases, you see they actually stand for the exact opposite of what Governor Dean is trying to to put forward as a constitutional position. So, the truth of the matter is that in fact our Constitution protects. It does. The First Amendment does its greatest work and its heaviest lifting when it is protecting the speech that we find objectionable and the speech that we find offensive. That's precisely why the founders put it there. Think about it. They were coming from a place where if you questioned the authority of the king or of the government, that you could be executed for that, or tortured or imprisoned. Your family could be taken away. Your property could be taken away. So what did they do when they got here and created this country? They said, we need to do away with that system to where you don't have the ability to question authority, or if you say something that somebody in a position of authority or power finds offensive, that you can be punished for that. And now here we are, in 2017, to where if you say something such as, that I believe that life in the womb should be protected, and that it deserves a right and a chance to live and to exist. That's now considered so hateful that it doesn't deserve protection of the First Amendment. That's ridiculous and outrageous.
Or if you say that marriage is between a man and a woman, I mean, that's considered very hateful because of the LGBT agenda out there. And so that's what happens. And that's why I'm speaking about them not being protected, because people who are offended by that or feel really scared by that, they do have to go out into a world where people have all different opinions. Their boss may have a different opinion. And so, they have to kind of just grow up a little bit and, be able to exist in a world where we have a diversity of opinions. I mean, that's really the beauty of America. And I think what's happening on the college campus and these major universities is it's actually eroding some of the founding principles. And so, we have to do something about it. And I think stand up and at least speak about it. Ann Coulter really tried to do that. I mean, she had to stay away because it was just going to turn into a very violent, and somebody could have been hurt or killed. But she, I'm proud of her for at least continuing the battle so that this could be public. How ridiculous the folks at Berkeley are for not, being able to protect a speaker, for heaven's sake.
It was interesting. There was a commentary that came out the other day and said, we still have a lot of freedom on campus. And you look back and you had William F. Buckley doing debates on campus. Yeah, but that was in the past. They point to Ravi Zacharias. Yes, sometimes those are the cases. But what it sometimes is that you have somebody that's maybe a little more extreme. Let's face it, Milo Yiannopoulos or Ann Coulter do say some things that, make us kind of wonder. But these other people that are getting hurt, Heather McDonald at Claremont McKenna, Charles Murray, these are really quality individuals that we've interviewed on the program. And when you react against those individuals who are thoughtful academics, you can realize that the campus really has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, and Ann Coulter, I mean, she is kind of, she's a provocateur in a sense, but she's got a book, and a lot of her writings have been on immigration. Berkeley is a sanctuary city. This is a real issue there. And for them to not have both sides of the equation at least floated to them so that they can understand it is really not a true education.
Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we want to get into that a little bit. We've got our lawyer here, and I know Mike Berry can help us out with that. Judge William Orrick decided that even the possibility that San Francisco or Santa Clara could be labeled as a sanctuary city, they have not been labeled that, is enough to overturn his executive orders. I want to talk about some of the legal issues there, and we've posted a very good piece by Andrew McCarthy called A Ruling About Nothing, because we're also dealing with something bigger than just even the legal ruling. That is this idea that states are thinking about, and certainly cities have been doing for some time, completely just dismissing anything that comes down from the federal government. And so if we don't have a rule of law, and if the law means something different every few years, or it means something different in the minds of governors or mayors, what kind of country do we have? So we're going to talk about that in the second hour. The ruling on sanctuary cities. We'll get into a couple of other issues. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Go to our website. You're going to find many of these articles and some opportunity to listen to the program again if you'd like. All that coming up right after this.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, and Mike Berry with us today. He's with First Liberty. I'm going to ask him some questions legally in just a minute. If you're just joining us in the first hour, we spent a little bit of time talking about reshaping the federal courts and talked a little bit about the first 100 days for Donald Trump, President Trump, as well as the question of some of the snowflakes on campus. Although we could now talk about the snowflakes in the city, I noticed that Andrew McCarthy said at one point some of the concerns about sanctuary cities said maybe we should call them snowflake cities. That was kind of a turn of phrase. But let's get into this decision of a ruling on sanctuary cities. We mentioned it just briefly the other day, but we want to come back and get into it in more detail. Judge William Orrick, 49 pages, basically says that the executive order that President Donald Trump has put forward, which is simply an attempt to already enforce existing federal law, could be unconstitutional because, and we'll try to figure all of this out, it might actually hurt San Francisco and Santa Clara. So this is sort of pre-enforcement anxiety, as some people call it. And more importantly, I guess the bigger issue, Mike, is just the fact that we can't allow individuals, if indeed we have federal law, to pick and choose what they're going to obey or disobey. And we already have lots and lots of so-called sanctuary cities. We have some states talking about being a sanctuary state. And if we can't enforce the laws at every state level, I think we run out of the ability to keep the cohesion of the United States together. What are your thoughts?
Well, actually, I think a good starting point is to back up a couple of years here. And I want to take us back to a couple of summers ago when we had a county clerk in the state of Kentucky who, because of her sincerely held religious beliefs, felt that she could not issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. And whether we agree or disagree with the theological rightness or wrongness of her decision, what I want to point out was so many in the media and on the left were decrying her, and in fact came up with a hashtag called "Do Your Job."
Yes.
Right, and we're telling that county clerk, Kim Davis, do your job. That's what you were hired to do. Do your job. Well, so let's fast forward a couple of years, and now we have mayors and city councils in these sanctuary cities who I would just like to see them do their job, right? Their job is to uphold the rule of law, to protect the citizens of their cities, and to follow the law of the land. And they're basically publicly declaring, I will not do that because I don't like the law.
Yes.
Well, okay. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. You don't get to pick and choose what laws you like and what laws you don't like. I recall hearing that, shouted loud and clear a couple of years ago. So, and let's look at this decision on the executive order. It leaves many attorneys, constitutional attorneys specifically, scratching their heads because, first of all, the decision really does violence to the actual language of the executive order. The executive order itself uses a phrase, a legal turn of phrase that you will see almost ubiquitously in any type of legislation, or more particularly things that come out of the executive branch via executive orders and memorandum and so on. And it is this turn of phrase, to the extent permissible by law, right? And so the executive order says, to the extent permissible by law, comma, ... and so on and so forth. Well, the judge, mysteriously failed to include that provision, that clause, in his analysis of this order. And so what the Trump administration is saying is, to the extent the law allows us to, we will deny federal funding to, cities that don't comply with federal law, so on and so forth. Well, okay, if it's not permissible by law, then the executive order is saying we won't do it. And the judge is saying, well, you're not, I think that you're not complying with the law, therefore I'm striking down this order. Well, the order already itself says we won't do it if it doesn't comply with the law. And then it simply directs the Justice Department to do what the Justice Department is clearly entitled to do. Okay, because the Justice Department exists. Its very purpose for existence is to enforce the law. And so the judge, of course, couldn't with a straight face say, well, that's unconstitutional. Well, no. So it's real. I mean, just as Andrew McCarthy says, it's much ado about nothing. Yes. Really, it is a ruling that does little, if anything, other than appease the political talking class, the pundits and those on the left who simply want to be able to thumb their nose at this president and to say, see, we gotcha. Well, okay, but the very moment the ink dried on this judge's order, the Justice Department was still enforcing the law of the land.
Right.
And the executive branch was not doing things that are not permissible by law. So it does nothing.
So really the definition of an executive order is, very often they're exceeded, but executive orders are supposed to take the law and give a presidential sort of prescription on how to execute it. So it's just kind of emphasizing what's already legal. And in some cases, that presidents go beyond that. We know that, but in this case, that's what this was, right, Mike?
Yeah, this really is all about the separation of powers, which is a central, fundamental foundation upon which our Constitution and our nation is built. Right, the separation of powers. We have 3 branches of government, and they each have their own duties and responsibilities and obligations. And the executive branch, the legislative branch, as we know, creates law. They make the law. And the executive branch, the reason it's called the executive branch is because they execute the laws. They carry out the laws. They enforce the laws. And one of the central tenets of separation of powers doctrine is that the president, unless Congress has actually delegated to the president the ability and the authority to do this, the president cannot create new law out of thin air. The president can merely take whatever authority Congress has given and said, the president shall, that's one of the reasons it says the president shall take care to faithfully execute the laws of the land. And so that's all this executive order was trying to do, is to say, look, we've been given the responsibility and the authority to carry out and enforce the federal laws. That's what we're going to do to the extent permissible by law. And so if Congress has not allowed us to do it, then we can't do it, and we won't. If Congress has allowed us to do it, that's what we're going to do. And basically sending a message to mayors and cities and municipalities across the country, hey, just be forewarned, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to carry out our mission, because apparently it hasn't been done for the last 8 years. So, well, guess what? There's a new kid on the block.
So what about the media in this? Because in a sense, President Trump said, on the campaign trail, or even at certain times, he said, we're going to defund any city that is a sanctuary city. We'll defund them. He used those words. So it's not complete defunding. It's only, as you said, the parts that are permissible by law in the statute. So the media has, in some senses, reported it as if the judge kind of dealt with the campaign speeches more than he did the actual law when he made in his opinion. So what about the media's responsibility here? Aren't they a little bit irresponsible in the way they're reporting this?
Well, sure. I recall being told by a president who was then campaigning that if I like my health care plan, I can keep it. Or if I like my doctor, I can keep him. And that turned out not to be true. So where was the media outcry when those campaign promises didn't come to fruition?
We'll talk more about this. And, of course, can we actually withdraw funds or withhold funds? We'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The new book by David Green has the arresting title, Giving It All Away. He is the founder of Hobby Lobby and tells the story of his success and calls for Christians to give generously to churches and other ministries. He was on my radio program last week, and we talked about Hobby Lobby, the Museum of the Bible, and the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Green family has been at the center of all this and much more. Most people know that Hobby Lobby is closed on Sunday. They may not also realize that their stores close earlier than other stores. That means they're only open 66 hours a week and compete with stores open many more hours. David Green did this so that his employees can spend more time with their families. Hobby Lobby also pays its full-time employees well. Back in 2009, they raised their base pay to $10 an hour. The next year, they tacked on $1. The next year, they did it again, and then again. This is another way that the Green family values their employees. I asked David Green if he ever imagined that he would have to sue the federal government. The thought never crossed his mind, but they did so when the HHS mandate would have required them to provide abortifacients for their employees. The fines alone would have cost him $1.3 million per day. Much of his book focuses on giving and challenges Christians to engage in the adventure of tithing. He has 3 principles they use and encourages all of us to implement them as well. First, set your criteria. What are you going to fund? What are your priorities? Second, set your giving amount. Give the first fruits, not what is left over. And finally, set fire for the future. He also has thought quite a bit about how to make generosity generational. His book is certain to spark your interest and encourage you in giving. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking about Judge Oreck's ruling on this issue of sanctuary cities. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those phone calls in just a minute. But Mike Berry with us, as well as Penna Dexter. But Mike, Judge Oreck contends, according to Andrew McCarthy, that if President Trump were to cut off funds from sanctuary cities for failure to assist federal immigration enforcement officials, it would offend the 10th Amendment. I like what, our individual here, Andrew McCarthy, says. He says this is unlikely. First, remember, though Judge Oreck studiously forgets, that Trump's order endorses only such stripping of funds as Congress has already approved. That gets back to the extent permissible by the law, right? I mean, again, we're not taking all the funds away, all the Medicaid funds and all the highway funds. We're talking about those funds that we give you so that you can actually work with immigration and the federal government, and you're not working with them, so why should we give you the money for it in the first place?
Precisely. I mean, I think something that people need to keep in mind is that the people who are writing these executive orders and coming up with these strategies and policies are extremely sharp, bright, intelligent people, and often they are attorneys and who are well versed in precisely what authority they have and what authority they don't have. And every word has meaning, and they choose their words very carefully and very precisely so as to not cross the line. And precisely because of the media uproar and the snowflake uproar, so on and so forth, over President Trump and everything he's done since day one in office, they're that much more sensitive to the fact that anything they do is likely to be immediately challenged in a court of law, and so they deliberately draft things to try to withstand that type of judicial scrutiny. And the judges keep just doing this end round and saying, well, that doesn't really matter because we think it might possibly be interpreted, or used in a way that, even though we've never seen it used that way before, and even though you haven't said that you're going to use it that way, it's possible that it might be used that way. So we're just going to go ahead and declare it unconstitutional.
So again, just incredibly interesting ruling here. A ruling about nothing is the article.
It's funny. I like this piece by McCarthy. It's actually clarifying for me, and it's on pointofview.net. It's at pointofview.net. We always post articles that go with what we talk about. One part of it was on page 4. He says that because San Francisco and Santa Clara receive lots of government funding, this is in the opinion by Judge Orrick, Trump's order afflicts them with, quote, pre-enforcement anxiety. Yeah. They're so scared they're going to lose their funds, their federal funding. They quake in fear that their safety net services and budgets will be slashed. And again, we're not talking about safety net services and budgets. We're talking about funds that have to do with immigration. So that's when he says sanctuary cities, maybe we should call them snowflake cities.
That's just, again, part of that. One of the bigger issues, and I'd like to open up the phones again for your comments, is what can or should we do? I mean, there is, first of all, the precedent that we've had for decades. I mean, really, you can go back, and I reminded this of our Millennial Roundtable. We have our millennials in here, and I say, before either of you were born, President Jimmy Carter actually said that he would withhold funds from the federal government to states that did not enforce a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Now, we can debate all day whether or not that made any sense at all, but the point is everybody goes, okay, then I guess we better do it. Just a year ago, we were hearing that President Barack Obama was saying we can withhold funds from, say, North Carolina if they don't implement these transgender bathroom bills. So what President Trump is actually putting forward, Mike, is not something that is new. It's something that has been done actually quite regularly by various presidents and various administrations, right?
That's right. I mean, that just goes back to my point that the people who are coming up with these, the wording and language of the executive orders, they've been around the block many times. They've been through many battles. They know what is permissible, what is impermissible. They're choosing their words very precisely and very carefully. But I think what we're seeing is it doesn't matter. The anti-Trump hysteria has taken over. It seems to be ground zero on the West Coast because that's where a lot of these rulings are coming from. But the rulings have no basis in the Constitution or law. It's really, I think, as Penna pointed out, it's this anxiety over what might happen or what could, in the imagination of somebody, happen.
Well, and again, that's a concern because if you start saying, nothing's actually happened, but I'm going to give you standing for what might happen, that messes up the legal system pretty badly, doesn't it? Because we always believe in standing. You have to have some legitimate hurt. So far as I understand, San Francisco and Santa Clara haven't even declared as sanctuary cities, much less not received their funds. So this is a ruling which is really kind of what Penna was talking about a minute ago, pre-enforcement anxiety, isn't it?
Right. And I mean, you brought up a great point, Kerby, that San Francisco and Santa Clara, I'm not sure about San Francisco, but with Santa Clara, I don't believe it's declared itself to be an official sanctuary city yet.
Yes.
And so, and we mentioned a few minutes ago, what can we as just ordinary, everyday citizens do? I think this is where all of this becomes very clear to me. It is so vitally important that we don't stop simply at presidential elections. Who we elect to be the mayor of our local town, of our cities, our local state representatives, our city council members, our county commissioners, so on and so forth, is so important because that's where the decision is being made to declare Santa Clara, or Richmond, Virginia, or where you name it. Omaha, Nebraska is now hereby a sanctuary city. And of course, I'm not saying that those places are, I'm just making them up. But, whoever becomes the mayor of Santa Clara is going to have so much power over that. So if you are somebody listening to this program in Santa Clara, California, and this is important to you, then pay attention to your local elections. As we like to say, all politics is local.
That is so true. In fact, right after the show today, I'm going to go to early voting and vote in my city elections. And we've got issues that they really affect me where I live. And so, it's very true. That's a very good point. I also want to kind of go to the broader issue of sanctuary cities.
Yes, that's what I would get to.
Sanctuary cities, they're basically hamstring law enforcement against people who are here illegally and who have a criminal record. And, in San Francisco, they had a murder of a beautiful young woman by
Kate Steinle?
By Kate Steinle, by an illegal alien who was a criminal and had other convictions and had been sent back and all of that. And so, there's a huge contingent of people that may not be quote unquote conservative people out there who, they don't want to see their city as a sanctuary city. And the quality of life in these cities deteriorates because of this. And so, President Trump, because of his rhetoric and what he said, not what he's done, because he hasn't done a whole lot, except for this, we've already had a significant reduction in the number of aliens seeking to enter the U.S. illegally. A significant reduction.
66%.
Talk about the wall has done this. Not a wall, but talk about the wall. So, just the change in attitude that our nation has toward this makes a difference. And then you do have to take some concrete actions too. But it's amazing the difference in attitude, and that goes to your elected officials in your local communities.
Let me open up the phones again and give you a chance to join our conversation. What do you think we should do about these sanctuary cities? Do you think it's appropriate to withhold funds? And that's the first issue. The other one I want to put on the table, it's something that Tucker Carlson was interviewing some people, and he asked this question time and time again for those people that are pro-illegal immigration or pro-open borders, and that is, what are you going to do? How are we going to do assimilation? We have more individuals in this country who have not grown up maybe learning the basics because we haven't taught it in the schools. And, of course, a number of them are here as foreigners. And so what are we going to do to assimilate individuals? I think that's a really good question. And every time he asks it, and I saw him ask it again last night, he gets all sorts of, well, Donald Trump's a bad guy. No, you're missing it. What are we going to do to assimilate this country? Because we are a melting pot country. Always have been. But individuals that came here from Italy, or they came here from Russia, they came here from Germany, they came here from South America. In the past, we tried to, first of all, put them through citizenship classes. And in some respects, I do think that those people that have been naturalized may know more about our history and our Constitution than some of the kids that go to the public schools. So that's the first thing. But what are we going to do to try to assimilate a culture where right now we have various individuals, including mayors in a lot of these cities, simply saying, I'm going to disobey the law. That sets a model for more lawlessness. So I'd love to get your thoughts. 1-800-351-1212. We have some other issues to cover, but if you would like to read this piece that Penna and I and Mike have been quoting from, it's by Andrew McCarthy. It's entitled A Ruling About Nothing, and it's the second article on our website, pointofview.net. We come back, let me take some phone calls because some of you have already started to weigh in with some of your comments. And, of course, you have some other stories that I think will help us understand why this issue of sanctuary cities and immigration is so important. So we'll take some of your phone calls, and then we'll continue talking about all sorts of issues that are relevant to your faith, your family, and your freedom. All that coming up right after these messages.
Point of View turned life right side up for Emily's children. Emily listens in Illinois. She and her husband blissfully sent their children off each day to what she called our small, quaint public school until Point of View led them to watch the documentary Indoctrination. She said, "We came to realize the need for us to educate our children at home. We want their education to be built on the solid foundation of Scripture." Emily said that would not have happened were it not for Point of View's bold consistency of shining light on public education. Your support for Point of View changes the future for children like Emily's. It leads people to start schools and ministries and businesses that change lives. How has the Truth Team impacted you? Please invest to bring truth to other families like Emily's. Support Truth today. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, got a full bank of phone calls. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Mike Berry. Let's go to Lisa in Texas. Lisa, tell us your story, if you might.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Kerby. My name is Lisa. I've spoken to you, sir, before. I'm a Gold Star mother from an area in the southern border, McAllen, Texas. The area that I want to focus are kind of like my words may not be, I'm not getting the sanctuary or how they're labeled as a sanctuary place, but I was born and raised in the area of McAllen, Edinburgh, and I'm talking about, I guess, what would cover Zapata all the way to Brownsville. And when I was a little girl growing up, we went to school and we had to speak English, and that's just the way it was. And so I learned English. My son was the first Marine killed from that area in Iraq.
Wow.
And it's been 13 years since my son was killed. And my little valley, the Rio Grande Valley, has changed dramatically. I no longer live there, but I have a library in Edinburgh named after my late son that the city bestowed that honor to us. And he paid a high price. He was trying to learn how to speak the Iraqi language so he could get along with the children over there, and I was sending him candy. And the way we thought about things is that, you're in the United States, you speak English. You go to Mexico, you speak Spanish. You go to Iraq, you learn their language. That's the philosophy. He was my family, I'm a Christian. My son was a Christian. It's really important that everybody understand the chaplain's positions in the different forces. After my son was killed, the contact I had with the chaplain there in Iraq, telling me about what my son was experiencing the day before they went out on this tour or expedition or whatever, that, Dusty went home. And so, number one. Number two, this thing about sanctuary and cities that are havens, I'm sorry, but I believe that my little valley, and I grew up in that area, let me put it to you this way. It is owned a lot, it's grown by what we refer to as cartel, and you don't ever go up against them.
Yeah.
And my family personally has been affected by it because we have someone that we cannot find, and they caught 2 people and released them in Brownsville because they were illegal.
Yeah.
And so...
And again, you're making the case for why Donald Trump is doing this. I mean, it isn't just that we want to control our borders. It's that we've lost control of some of our borders, and just having cartel individuals in this country and running those kinds of things. Lisa, first of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for sharing about your son, and we thank you for his service. And since we have a full bank of phone calls, we want to try to get to as many calls as we can. So let's go to Alaska, KJNP. And Trevor, what would you like to add to our conversation?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you to Lisa for her son's service. That's always rough to hear from. It's very nice to have a show that's not canned up here, so thank you for that.
Yes, and I'm going to be up with you guys in October, so I'm looking forward to speaking there at KJMP.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
We should still have a few mosquitoes for you.
And probably a little snow by then. We'll see. So I'll see you soon. But what would you want to add to the conversation today?
Well, the sanctuary cities, I think, are treason against the United States. And as Christians, I find it very interesting that people choose to support them when we're commanded to obey the laws of the land by our God and Creator. Where we live is where we are, and we're supposed to demonstrate by humility and obedience our faith. How is sheltering somebody who is here illegally, who's already broken the law to come here, how is allowing them to become a citizen when they've already demonstrated contempt for our laws honoring that commitment?
And again, in most cases, Mike, we're talking about individuals that have done more than just cross the border. They are engaged in some kind of action. And theologically, for just a minute, aren't we supposed to obey those in authority? Romans 13?
Absolutely. And, Trevor brings up a great point that as Christians, we are called to obey the law of the land. When we have rulers who are lawfully appointed over us, and they pass laws. I mean, I use the term ruler very loosely here. I mean, whether it be Congress or a president or even at the state and local level, governors and so on and so forth. If we are to be a country, right, one of the things under the law that you use to determine whether something even qualifies as the definition of a nation, of a sovereign nation, is do they have the rule of law? Because if there is no rule of law, it's what we call anarchy. And if there's anarchy, then you don't really have a true country to speak of. And so that's really what this is getting down to is, are we going to have the rule of law in this country or not?
Let's take some more phone calls. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll go to Texas, KAVX. Laura, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I am just maybe a little too simple for the rest of this country or for anybody, but my faith is in Jesus Christ. I love listening to y'all. I love this country. But isn't the very simple thing that the law is being broken? Aren't these judges, in effect, harboring, aiding, and abetting criminals? Isn't that against the law? And aren't these judges also legally committing obstruction of justice? Why are we even debating this whenever the law is there? If I have to obey it, you have to obey it. Why don't they? You don't interpret what is there. That is obstruction. I don't understand why there's so much back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If it's the law, it's the law. Plain and simple.
They're lawless. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, what I always think back to is when people say, well, we don't, as Christians, if it's a bad law, that goes against us, then we're supposed to violate it. Look, at the beginning of the show, we talked about Monica Sterling. And people will say, oh, well, she was given an order and that's the law. Why didn't she just obey the law? Well, here's the thing, is she's actually going through a court of law, a system of justice in order to seek to have her rights vindicated. So it's not a form of anarchy. And then I'll hear some other Christians or other people say, well, these laws are hurtful and offensive and therefore we can't obey them. And I just remember, what did Jesus say when he was with us on this earth? And he said, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, right? And so who are we then as individuals, as humans, to say, well, I have the individual right as somebody to just abolish whatever laws that I don't like or I don't agree with? And I realize, I don't want to get too far afield into theology and whatnot, but I just want to remind people that just as all of our callers have really pointed to, is the rule of law has to mean something. The ability of the citizens to follow the law and for the ability of the government to enforce the law has to mean something. Otherwise, we don't have a society.
Yeah. Hashtag do your job, right?
That's right.
Obey the law. We need another hashtag. And again, you can see why people are getting upset. He said, that same mayor in that town would not obey the law. But if I go just 5 miles over the speed limit in that city, I'm going to get a ticket. So it doesn't seem fair. And that's what happens when you start disobeying governmental edicts or laws. You don't have the rule of law, is everybody begins to think that really anarchy is okay for everybody. If it's okay for the mayor, why isn't it okay for me?
We kind of have a theme today for the show because we've talked about the college campus where the thugs and the protesters are allowed to the full power. And now the cities where people, who expect to be protected by their government, they pay their taxes so they can have a police force and city officials and things like that. And they're not doing their job. They're not following the law. So in a sense, it's scary to look at the direction of the country. You can begin to understand why there's such a battle over the First Amendment right to bear arms, because if people cannot depend on their government to protect them in ways that we have lined out in our traditions and in our laws, then it does become anarchy, and we have to then we have to take matters into our own hands, and we don't want to become that.
Well, and again, I see somebody putting up the word prophecy. I was waiting for that one to show up, because if you think about this, we're almost kind of in the book of Judges. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes, and that back to your point, Mike, is anarchy. And if you lose the rule of law, there are many countries in the world that I was looking at the numbers the other day, and it's pretty striking, where they either don't control their borders, or they don't have a system of law, or there is essentially anarchy, or they sort of control their land, but they don't have enough of a police force to control it. those are usually called banana republics or totalitarian regimes. You just hope that the United States of America, which is the last remaining superpower, doesn't turn into one of those, don't you?
Yeah, I remember when I was in Afghanistan, with the Marines, and I was speaking to a local Afghan, and we were way out in the Helmand province, which is kind of like the Arizona of Afghanistan, if you will. And Kabul would be like the Washington, D.C. of Afghanistan. And I asked him about the then president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, in Kabul. And he said that, who is Hamid Karzai? It was like as if I was referring to an alien from a different planet. Why is that? Because they don't understand borders and the rule of law in that country.
It's just amazing. Let's take a break. We'll take some more phone calls right after this.
Vice President Mike Pence is scheduled to be the commencement speaker at the University of Notre Dame this year. But two snowflake types in Notre Dame's senior class say that because he represents the Trump administration, the vice president's presence on campus will make them feel unsafe. Notre Dame often invites newly elected presidents to address the graduates, but, well, there was this petition against inviting President Trump. Besides, Mike Pence is the perfect choice. He's articulate, gracious, and the recent governor of Indiana, the state where Notre Dame sits. Hundreds of alumni and staff have signed a letter being circulated on social media expressing empathy for students who feel marginalized by White House statements and policies. Poor babies. Certainly there will be other graduating college seniors traumatized by the commencement speaker their school has chosen. We're already seeing rioting, violence, property damage, physical assault, and canceled speeches. Students warn that if they're female, non-white, or openly non-heterosexual, they are in physical or psychological danger from hearing a conservative speak. This Students as Victims mantra is really another very disturbing manifestation of the leftist ideology that has, for decades, prevailed among faculty and administrations of the nation's colleges and universities. The Wall Street Journal recently published an opinion piece by conservative thinker Heather McDonald, whose speech at Claremont McKenna was cut short by protesters. She points out that at the center of all this campus intolerance is a worldview that sees Western culture as both racist and sexist. The overriding goal of the educational establishment, she writes, is to teach young people within the ever-growing list of victim classifications to view themselves as essentially oppressed. Universities had better start clamping down and enforcing the law. Otherwise, after graduation, snowflakes will be in for a rude awakening in a world where no one's going to protect them from opinions they don't agree with. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and we'll take some more phone calls. In studio with us for at least this last segment here, Penna Dexter and Mike Berry. Let's go to Vanessa in New Mexico. Vanessa, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for taking my call. I pretty much just wanted to echo everything that everybody else is saying. I just believe that the elected officials that choose to not obey the laws should be prosecuted and put in jail themselves because, again, just like the lady said before, if I choose to obey some laws and not other laws, I'd get thrown in jail or prison or whatever. And I'm thankful that our president continues to push forward and is not stopped and dismayed and everything else by all the attempts to stop him from trying to keep our country safe. And just like that lady called earlier, and she said, when she came to this country a little ago, or was whichever it was, she said, we learned English in school. That was it, and that's logic. And the other thing is, what I wish people would say is, I don't think most Democrats care about the people who want to come to this country. They just care about the votes, and that's what I wish people would recognize. And if we had a smaller government that was functioning more efficiently, and we had an intake system where we could take more people in and help them to assimilate, then we could take more people who want a better life. But you hit the nail on the head with assimilating. That's what people don't do anymore, and that's why we're such a divided country, is everybody just stays in their own corner. The melting pot, I'm 58, and you don't hear that anymore except from someone who's around my age. Yeah. And that's really true.
As old guys around here.
We learned about that in school.
Yeah.
We did learn about it. I don't know that they learn about the melting pot anymore.
Something something that was just mentioned that I think we have haven't really focused on too much, but it's why are they so interested? Are they truly interested in people coming to this country who are, the statistics show are more likely to commit crimes and violent crimes and things like that? Or what is it? What is their real interest in? It's in the votes, right? It's because they're likely to vote Democrat because those are the ones who are saying we should have open borders and no rule of law in this country, et cetera. And that's one of the things that really, I think, drives me crazy is, that brings up a great point. If you don't like the laws that we have in this country, our country has this wonderful thing. It's a system to change those laws, right? And you have the opportunity to vote to change those laws. So if the Democrats are so confident, and I shouldn't just say Democrats, but if whoever it is so confident that having closed borders or sovereignty of a nation is such a bad thing, and that having sanctuary cities and open borders is such a good thing, then why not let the people put it to a vote and let the people decide if that's truly what they want or not? Why? Because I suspect they know that will lose every time.
It has been losing. I mean, there are attempts even on the part of Republicans over the last couple of decades to open up our immigration system to be have a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants, and it never gets voted on, or it never passes. And another statistic in regard to this is that 80% of Americans oppose sanctuary cities.
Yes.
So it's these officials, and they're trying to get votes.
They can't accomplish it through the constitutionally mandated procedure and method. So they just do like these judges we've been talking about. They just say, well, we'll figure out our own way then. Who cares what the rules say? Who cares what the laws say? We know what's best.
Let's take at least one more phone call. Many of you might have had a chance to hear Penna Dexter's commentary, which we played again on liberal snowflakes. I think Daniel in Nevada, KYCC, wants to talk about that term snowflake. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the work that you all do, Penna and Kerby and just everybody else, Debbie and Rick. Anyway, so the snowflake thing was just a quick comment I had posted earlier this morning on my Facebook. Free speech violence, safe spaces, and snowflakes, oh my, twice, And anyway, I looked up the term snowflake. I mean, I know what it means, but it's interesting how in the Urban Dictionary it now says, which a lot of millennials kind of refer to. I know it's just the Urban Dictionary, it doesn't mean anything, but it talked about, it's a term that the neo-Nazi and alt-right party came up with, and I thought, that's pretty typical of, anything on the internet, just kind of putting a spin on something. And then secondly, what I was going to say about sanctuary cities, here in Reno, I know that the city council has recently come up with kind of a new term where they don't call it a sanctuary city. And unfortunately, a lot of folks with really interesting political views have moved over here from our neighboring state, California, which I say, it's just kind of how it's become. But anyways, it's really something that we here need to pay attention to, because it's just kind of a sneaky way of how, one side of the aisle likes to kind of covertly name things to where, but it's really I don't know much about it because I'm busy, but
what's the new term?
I don't know. I don't remember. They're calling it something else. It's not a sanctuary city. but it's kind of like a similar ideology. I was talking to somebody who was illegal earlier.
Hopefully
in
not
my
Snowflake
work.
City.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, we're the Battleborn State, so I grew up here, so I definitely won't go by that. But anyway, I was talking to an illegal earlier that was working, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, do you guys get paid overtime working Saturdays?" And we work 40 hours a week. We do not get paid overtime. And I said, "Well, you're illegal." I didn't know he was illegal. He said, "Yeah, a lot of us are." So I think that first of all, when people were talking about deporting 11 million illegals, that's just a ridiculous. But I'm all for upholding the laws of this land. I'm very grateful for Neil Gorsuch. Very grateful.
Good.
Extremely grateful.
We need to get going. We're just about out of time, so I unfortunately have to cut it off right there. I was looking it up too. Some of them call them welcoming cities and things like that, but we'll get all the terms up there. But
I do believe Reno is called the biggest little city on earth, right?
Yeah.
But and I will say that he's fortunate to be in Nevada, because Nevada, as I happen to know from personal experience, has a very strong attorney general who does believe in the rule of law.
Yes, that's right.
And so that's just one little word of encouragement there, that you happen to live in a state that has a strong attorney general who believes in the rule of law, and so be encouraged.
If nothing else, we have posted a number of articles today. We didn't get to the one on ESPN, but they had the layoffs and everything, and we've got talking about that. And maybe next week, I know Kelly Shackelford loves sports, but ratings down 16%. But they finally said it was dropping anyway. But then what made it worse is Middle America wants to pop a beer, listen to sports talk. They don't want to be lectured about why Caitlyn Jenner is a hero. Michael Sam is the new Jackie Robinson of sports, and Colin Kaepernick is the Rosa Parks of football. I thought that was a good piece.
Yeah, we don't want to think about politics. We want to be diverted from all of this stuff.
Right, more do your job, right?
Yeah, another one of those do your job. Again, Michael Berry is, of course, with First Liberty, and he is, of course, senior counsel as well as the director of the Military Affairs Division. And you can go to firstliberty.org. We already have a link there to the first article, and I hope that you'll take the time to find out more. One more time, though, as I mentioned, if you are in the military, you know somebody in the military, and their religious liberty has been infringed, Michael wants to hear from you, right? And you'll take those phone calls.
Absolutely. Firstliberty.org.
And again, this is just a great series of articles we've posted today on reshaping the federal courts, the ruling on sanctuary cities, a couple of about what has been happening on the campus, and even one on ESPN. So take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net, and take the time to enjoy this weekend. But please, if you can, as you go to that website, you might click on the button that says Donate Now, or think about maybe clicking on that banner that says Join the Truth Team. We are dependent upon your financial gifts as we are doing what we can to rebuild truth in a post-truth culture. So again, all of that is available at our website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for the help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.